Really great being here, and I'd just like to thank the banner for inviting me. But more importantly, but bringing all of us together to talk about how we can impact our region. With all the things going on around the world, it's nice to come here and talk about big ideas. It's nice to come back and really talk about how we can change the world. And that's what this is all about. I see so many friends and colleagues around the room, so I know this is going to be a very engaging, interactive day, so I encourage you to lean into this discussion. As Kimmy so kindly mentioned, today I'm here to share with you a big idea for Maryland, which is big enough that it has implications and benefits for the entire country. My story today is about total transformation of the energy grid and how it will take all of us, you can hear that theme, all of us, to get there. This is, of course, a topic that is near and dear to my heart. As you learned in the introduction, I'm the CEO of Exelon Corporation, which is the largest transmission and distribution company in the United States. We have the pleasure of having 3 of our 6 utilities right here in Maryland. BGE, which is providing the power today, Delmarva Power, and Pepco. We serve nearly 3 million customers, residential and business, and we impact more lives through those of you who visit the businesses that we have the pleasure of serving. The numbers we touch continue to grow, but it's not just about touching those customers. It's what are we doing to engage with their businesses and help them grow. Exelon has an important role to play. So it's only fitting that we're part of this conversation. So let me kind of share with you, set the stage, if you will. In the late 18 and early 1900s, energy pioneers, Thomas Edison, Louis Latimer, Nikola Tesla, and others were involved in many inventions that would go on to revolutionize the world. You flip a switch, a light bulb comes on, an act that inspired awe in so many things. Matter of fact, it's so common, we now refer to it as that aha moment, right? A big idea, an innovation. We are now in what is Edison's, Latimer's, and Tesla's future. But things have not really fundamentally changed. Sure, what involved into the energy grid has gotten bigger, and there are more demands on it than ever before. But the way energy flows from power plants over poles and wires to our homes and businesses is very similar to the way the system was first designed. So the question we have to ask is why? The energy grid, after all, was the single most biggest important engineering achievement of the last century. It was that century's big idea, and it was built to last. But humans continue to advance, and our needs are changing rapidly. If you blink your eyes, there's a new iPhone and a new charger that has to go along with it. And the charger you bought last year, you can't use this year, right? But yet, we've been modernizing the grid to keep up with demand, and although I promise you, you don't have to change out all of your appliances. You just need to make them energy efficient. And yes, that's important, because technology will continue to change, and our energy grid has gotten smarter. So what's the big idea? It's not the smart grid. You can now track your energy use and your bills in real time. If your usage is a little high, you can shift activities, like cooling or charging your EVs to off-peak hours. Or like many of our parents, walk in each room and turn off the lights. You know the routine. Meanwhile, at our local energy companies, why has it been so important? Well, we hope through smart thermostats, smart meters, we've been able to serve you better. In real time, we know when your home or your business has a problem. In real time, we can get you on sooner rather than later. When those storms roll through and your lights flicker and they don't go out, That's the smart grid at work. That's technology. Now, while the smart grid was, and I would call it a pretty good idea, that's not the big idea I'm presenting today. We started the smart grid transition probably back in 2009 and completed it in 2015. Today, I'd like to talk to you about an idea that I've been very interested in my entire career, and I've really leaned into it since I became CEO of Exelon. That is the total transformation of the energy grid. We have the opportunity, and by we, I mean everyone in this room. We have the opportunity to have such a major impact on the way we live today and well into the future. Generations, how they live, how our children's children live. And while this may sound like an energy company idea, it's much more than BGE, Delmarva Power, and Pepco. The big idea is that the energy transformation will only work if all of us in this room do it together. Yesterday's energy grid was about flowing power in one direction. Tomorrow's energy grid is something very different. It's more than about from a power plant and flipping a switch. The grid of the next generation is increasingly about flowing power in multiple directions. Some of you in this room may have solar panels on your roof. Imagine a scenario where you just don't use it for your use, you put it back on the grid for others to use. That's what we're talking about. That's what we're talking about, making sure that the energy of the future is much more than about fossil fuels. Making sure that we someday can power this new grid with clean power. You've also heard of microgrids. Microgrids are those generating stations that can power a whole community without connecting to the system. All this happens today, but on a very small scale. We need to get away from using fossil fuels and using oils. We used them before we became aware of the impact of greenhouse gases. Greenhouse gases produced by those fuels and the impact they had on our environment. The next generation of energy will be from renewables, like solar and wind. The way the grid works now will change. The idea was, tomorrow, we used to just make more. But guess what? The wind doesn't always blow, unless you're in Chicago. And the sun doesn't always shine. So what are we going to do? As we set goals for renewable energy, we always have to keep that in mind. And let me just tell you this, it's not about just technology. It's about climate. There was a quote by a Swedish activist, Greta Thunberg. You've probably heard of her. A child, really, teenager now. This is what she said. When enough people come together, then change will come, and we can achieve almost anything. So instead of looking for hope, start creating it. Young Swedish environmental activists said that. And that's what we're talking about, creating hope. Not just about technology, but how we can turn the tides of climate change. And this is all about transforming the energy grid. That big idea, I'm teasing my guy back there for the teleprompter, he's like, where is he? That's okay. That big idea. The big idea is simply that as citizens, we have to shift our reliance on fossil fuels and away from one-way flow of energy to a complete transformation of that energy grid, because it will change our lives. To help us boil this down to one big idea, a few minutes I have today, let me borrow a phrase from the Scottish town planner and activist, Patrick Geddes, who said, think global, act local. Think global, act local. Think Maryland, act in Baltimore. Looking around this room, we have the perfect microcosm to make these things happen. And why is it important? Former President Barack Obama said, we are the first generation that will be impacted by climate change. And we are the last generation that can do something about it. What I'm telling you today is that I'm committed. I'm committed through our local energy companies for us to do something about it. As we do this, we must think even beyond our own personal habits, our own personal vehicles. Right now, we're also thinking about what can we do with our local schools. Maryland this year passed a law called Climate Solutions Now Act, which has said they're going to invest in the electrical grid system by electrifying school buses, and saying that all new school buses that come online must be electric, no longer will be powered by diesel fuel. Great idea. But we have an opportunity even bigger than that. What if we were to say that we were going to replace all school buses and make them electric? Why is that important? Well, just think about what I told you about that grid. No longer the one-way flow, because when those buses are no longer moving kids, when those buses are no longer moving you from point A to B, they serve as battery storage units. And they provide power back to the grid. And by providing power back to the grid, guess what it's doing? It's also cleaning up the environment in which you and I breathe. It's also making an impact on the communities that you and I live. Because this is what we do know. Climate change impacts Black and brown communities more than anyone else. Climate change is the #1 issue that we are facing as a society. We can't afford to not to have a big idea. We cannot afford to stand pat and just let the world pass us by and think that someone else will take care of it. See, so it's much more than just about technology. And what I'm here to tell you is that transforming the energy grid is the backbone in that effort, because we also know that automobiles are the #1 cause of greenhouse gases that exist today. That's the connection. Maryland, it's on its way. But the question is, what are we in this room going to do? But more importantly, what are we in this room going to demand? And what you need to hear from me today, nothing else, is that you have a partner. You have a partner in Exelon Corporation that is willing to roll up their sleeves and to get this done. What you need to hear from me today is that we have a group of people that are committed to having the tough conversations. What you need to hear from me today is that we have all the assets and the will to make a difference on our society, but we cannot continue to expect someone else to solve it. I asked Kimmy backstage and Monique, I said, what are you hoping to accomplish from today? She said, start a conversation. Start a conversation of how the powerful people in this room and across this city, across this region, and across this state can make a difference. I'm honored to be included in this because it's a recognition that I and the leadership team that I have the opportunity to represent is trying to make a difference. But more importantly, I'm honored to be included in this conversation because I respect so many of you in this room, and I know the effort that you put in to try to make a difference. But here's the real question. Always ask yourself what's next. What's happened from the conversations we started yesterday? Because Mr. Geddes would tell you he was not just a technician and so forth, he was also a sociologist. And by being a sociologist, what he would tell you is that he saw the power of people in everything he did. He saw what can come together when people get together to really drive a change. The big idea, transforming the electric grid, is more than just about technology. It's about impacting our world for generations to come, reducing the impact of climate change. But it requires you, all of us, to change our daily habits of how we do and what we think about energy usage, but more importantly, how are we informing the next generation? Because as President Obama said, this is the generation that must deal with it. Let me close with this. We have many partners along this journey. Later today, you will hear from Secretary Buttigieg. The federal government is a partner in this process. They have passed significant legislation bringing about billions of dollars to states across the country. But those dollars mean nothing if we don't have the leadership available and willing in this room to push the agenda faster than ever before. Because as we know, billions of dollars is not what it used to be. So what are we going to do to put that money to work? And let's make sure that we are very inclusive in our efforts, focused on the understanding and meeting the needs of underserved communities. Because as we do this energy transformation, it does no one good, any good, if parts of the city of Baltimore, parts of the state of Maryland are left behind in this transformation. Because really, it's not a transformation then. It's just creating a greater equity and balance. We have to do it in a just and equitable way. So every community is part of this transformation. Every community benefits from this transformation. And I'll close with a quote from the Dalai Lama, because you never can go bad when you close with the Dalai Lama, right? And he says this: it is our collective and individual responsibility to protect and nurture the global family, to support its weaker members, and to preserve and test to the environment in which we all live. We have to be inclusive, we must collaborate, and we must think big. And any step along that journey, you truly can have transformation. And what I'm asking each of you today is open your mind and be part of the solution. Don't just identify the problems. Roll up your sleeves and tell everybody you're here to work. Thank you very much and have a great day.